Hi, Troy at the Full Setup here, back with another video for you today. Now, over the next few months while we wait for Ryzen Plus and cheaper Coffee Lake processors to launch, I really plan to focus on cheap second-hand hardware and why buying used but loved hardware can make for a better gaming experience than buying new budget hardware at a similar price point. So expect lots of graphics cards and super cheap i5 gaming builds from me over the next few months. Anyway, enough about that. What are we reviewing today? Well, in today's video I will be benchmarking a legendary budget GPU, the GTX 750 Ti. The 750 Ti has been the go-to budget card since its launch, and every budget graphics card that has been released since has always been compared to this GPU in benchmarks. So in today's video we're going to see if the 750 Ti is still good for 1080p gaming, or is it time to upgrade? Moving on to the test setup, so we are using an Asus 750 Ti today, which I picked up for £55 in early 2017. Now, although the Nvidia 7 series is normally associated with the Kepler range of graphics cards, the 750 Ti is based on the Maxwell architecture and features 640 CUDA cores. It has a base clock of 1072 MHz and a boost clock of 1150. As for memory, it features 2GB of GDDR5 running at 5.4 gigabits per second on a 128-bit memory bus, and requires a 6-pin external power. As for overclocking, I really struggled to push the memory more than 200 MHz, but I was easily able to add 150 MHz to the core, so hopefully that gains us a few extra frames per second. To exclude any bottlenecks, I've paired it with a Ryzen 1700 at 3.8 GHz and 16 GB of Corsair Vengeance DDR4 running at 3000 MHz. I know, it's complete overkill. Moving on to the game test then, well, I thought it's best to start with a few older titles and move on to games that came out in the later part of 2017. Hopefully this should give us a great indication how the 750 Ti will perform at 1080p gaming moving into 2018. Rise of the Tomb Raider at maxed out settings is one of the most beautiful games I've ever played, but in doing so it does require a huge amount of VRAM, so at medium settings with FXAA enabled I had a minimum of 20.1 and an average of 43.9 frames per second. Moving on to Battlefield 1, I've decided just to add gameplay footage as I do not think average FPS in the campaign can be compared to multiplayer. I could have collected average scores in multiplayer, but as this game has a large range of game modes and maps, again it would be very hard for me to show a true average for you. As for the footage you are seeing on screen, this is the latest Turning Tides DLC. I'm running at medium settings with AA disabled. The game mode is 64 player Conquest, and the 750 Ti has no trouble reaching the golden 60 frames per second. And please remember, this is recorded footage, so it is actually about 5 FPS higher when not recording. What is a gaming benchmark without Grand Theft Auto 5? Well, at high settings with FXA enabled and advanced graphics turned off using the built-in benchmark, the 750 Ti scored a minimum of 31 and an average of 68 frames per second. Moving on to the least demanding game I will be testing today, and a great indication how well the 750 Ti will perform in esports titles. Now, I know a lot of you would prefer to play at lower settings for higher FPS, but I've decided to run Overwatch at ultra settings with 100% resolution scale, and I was achieving a minimum of 54.3 and an average of 61.6 frames per second. If we could sum the latter part of 2017 gaming up in a few words, I think we can all agree it was the year of the loot box. So let's see how they perform on the 750 Ti. Need For Speed Payback seems to have had some much improved optimization since I played the beta, and at medium settings the 750 Ti scored a minimum of 45.1 and an average of 53.9 frames per second. Shadow of Mordor was a game that ran really well on a 750 Ti at high settings and was still pretty playable with a few ultra thrown in too. Sadly, 2017 Shadow of War is a much more demanding on the VRAM. Running at medium settings on the inbuilt benchmark, the 750 Ti scored a minimum of 24 and an average of 39 frames per second. Another game that loved to run at high to ultra settings on the 750 Ti was EA's 2015 version of Star Wars Battlefront, but sadly Battlefront 2 is also a much more demanding shooter. I will save you all for my Battlefront 2 rant, as I never really planned to make a video that's an hour long, but again at medium settings I was achieving a minimum of 39 and an average of 47 frames per second in Galactic Assault. PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, well, you kept asking me for it and I finally gave in. I definitely should have listened to you and purchased it when you requested it, as me and my friends love playing this game, whether it's us all huddled around the ultra ride or playing on the projector. As soon as we get killed we want to just jump straight back in for another round. Although it is a fantastic game, it is terribly unoptimized, and on the latest map at low settings the 750 Ti scores a minimum of 36.9 and an average of 57.2 frames per second. If Rise of the Tomb Raider was one of the most beautiful games I've ever played, then Assassin's Creed Origins is the most beautiful. Now, I'm normally happy to play this game at 45 frames per second with as high settings as I can, and although Origins is much more friendly on the VRAM than 2015 Syndicate, it is an absolute killer on the CPU. Either way, the 750 Ti really struggles with this game. At medium settings, I was achieving a minimum of 25.1 and an average of 28.5 frames per second. So there are the gaming benchmarks, and hopefully the games that came out in the second half of 2017 should show you how the 750 Ti will perform going into 2018. It's my personal opinion that although it performs better than both the GT 1030 and RX 550, it might be time to upgrade to a new graphics card. Although it's perfectly capable at eSport titles at ultra and first person shooters on medium to low settings, the 750 Ti really struggles at larger AAA open world games. Although they were mostly playable, when it comes to games like this, I really do prefer to play them with a mix of high to ultra settings so we can see them how the developer intended us to see them. That being said, if you manage to pick one up for between $50 and $75, you really can't complain at its price to performance scores. So what are your thoughts? I'd be really interested to know. Are you thinking of buying a 750 Ti, or maybe you're thinking it's time that you should cash in and put the money towards a 1050 Ti, or even better, a used GTX 970? Anyway, that's it from me today. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you disliked the video, leave a dislike. And if you really liked the video, please make sure you subscribe.